We're talking about harnesses.
Yeah, because I don't know much about them. I'm hearing the word a lot, and you were just giving like a really good, concise explanation about what they are. So hit me with that again.
Yeah, so, this whole thing started, this whole wave started with the chatbots, prompt, get a response. And then we moved into kind of like agentic workflows. This is like linking large language models with tools and kind of having them do like these deterministic workflows. Now this whole harness conversation is moving to the direction of understanding that it's basically creating the environment for these large language models to thrive in.
Cool.
And I was kind of thinking about that on a personal level, about like whether the things in my environment are conducive to the lifestyle that I'm trying to live, right?
Interesting.
Do I have the proper harness to kind of, draw out the creativity or the fulfillment that I'm trying to achieve in my life?
Draw some more parallels between that metaphor.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it helps just to go a little deeper on
the harnesses.
On the harnesses, right?
Okay.
Because the way that I understand it is agentic. I have a hard time determining, just because I'm not technical, understanding like the difference between an agentic system, like basically an LLM that has access to tools through function calling, and what a harness actually is. It's just like a more sophisticated way to express like that setup.
So what I'm understanding now is that those agentic workflows they're kind of designed for one-off specific outcomes, right? Whereas the harness, I think the kind of the most viral harness that we have now.
Claude?
No.
Claude Code.
Yeah. So that was the first one where they kind of created this environment that is like designed to make those Claude models excel. And you can actually look at the benchmarks that when you have the model itself with just tools versus like the secret sauce that recently leaked with the Claude Code, right? That environment that they designed really was designed to help this specific model thrive, right? And now we're actually finding it's actually really helpful for other models as well.
Okay.
Right. Cool. Yeah. So it's more about the environment that is it's designing an environment that is designed to help these LLMs thrive at multiple tasks, specifically coding in this sense, but you can create a harness for thriving for any specific outcome.
So OpenClaw was another, I think, example that showed people like once another thing exists in the environment, you could see better that the species of the thing, which is the harness, right? That's what essentially OpenClaw is, right? It's like an open source harness.
Yeah. Honestly, the original name was like OpenClaw or Claude Bot, right? And it was a kind of a tongue-in-cheek pointing to Claude.
Right.
And it was a harness that used this very similar harness that used the Claude models. Yeah. And so I might go in a different but related direction. Okay. So there's this thing called, have you heard of carcinization?
No.
Carcinization is this biological principle. Basically, they find that there is a whole bunch of animals that look like crabs, but they're not crabs. Okay. Like the crab form keeps evolving over and over and over again in the sea for some reason. We don't know why. We have reasons if you kind of look at it, we can kind of like maybe understand it's a flat form, right? Maybe something about that form keeps evolving separately, convergently from different lines of evolution. And we're seeing that same thing with OpenClaw, right? And so the original OpenClaw was kind of it's a harness, but it's an open source harness, right? And so it allowed people to do everything. It gave this sense of like true agency that you can, throw this LLM in this system and it has access to do whatever. It gave it the environment to do whatever. It could talk on your Telegram. Right. It could, connect to your Alexa, whatever. Right. And then what we've noticed so far is that after the OpenClaw kind of got sued, and they didn't get sued, but they threatened legal action, and they kind of shifted away. What we're seeing is that more and more of these companies are carcinizing. They're crabifying.
Okay, I like that. Right? Yeah.
We'll use crabifying. Yeah. So, but it's weird because the same principle exists in nature, right? Where everything kind of converges into this optimal form of like crab. You're seeing the same thing happen in AI, where everyone's kind of converging to this kind of the similar form of the OpenClaw model, which is a beautiful harness that gives these agents a lot of freedom to kind of use their intelligence to get, specific outcomes.
Right.
Right. So now we see Claude, the original inspiration of OpenClaw,
Right.
adopting a
Becoming more
ton
Yeah.
of OpenClaw features. Right.
Yeah.
So
That's just what the market demands, though, right? They're doing it because of the popularity of OpenClaw, right? Now you're seeing all these features released that make it look exactly like OpenClaw for the most part, right? And then they're like kind of killing off the ability to use free tier, or not free tier, but like your personal account, and you have to use API. So
they're trying to get you into their
ecosystem.
walled garden. Yeah.
Garden. What do you think? Do you like? Have you? 'Cause I just actually. I caved. I bought the Mac Mini. I just installed OpenClaw.
Okay.
It only took me like a year, but I'm not super impressed with it yet. To be honest, I haven't played around with it enough. But before I was using Claude Code, and I felt like I could do everything that I can do, at least right now, on OpenClaw than I can on Claude Code. Is there any use to these I don't know if you've played around with it enough, but do you have any?
These open source harnesses.
Yeah, is it still the thing to do, or is it just like a thing that's talked about?
I think in principle, like the concept of the harness right now, right? I think last year, like the buzzword was agent,
Right.
right? This year, I think the buzzword is looking like it's harness, right?
Yeah.
I think, but the question is still, what can you do? What is the actual practical application?
Yeah, because it was sold to me as like, okay, I'm gonna talk to it via Telegram, and it's gonna take over my computer and do whatever I want. And so I started. It was cool to talk to it via Telegram, but then it was like, I can't do this because of this permission setting, and it's like a whole bunch of things that you have to configure. And even when you do configure them, it's not as like seamless as people say it is.
It's not.
Yeah.
I think it does. Yeah, it requires a lot of like technical
Tweaking, and a lot of it, like, it can walk you through, right? It's like you just have to hit allow or give permission a bunch of times, but it'll get there. It's just not as straightforward as people say it is.
I don't think OpenClaw is, but I might shout out to Hermes.
Oh yeah, you big Hermes guy now?
I've been playing around with Hermes for a little bit, and again, part of that whole carcinization or crabifying, right? They've essentially taken that original concept of OpenClaw and just like cleaned it up a lot, right? And so they've designed a harness that I think you can actually download it locally and run it on
I'm gonna do it because you can have both of them. Yeah.
It would probably be a lot better to run something like a Hermes. It's just a lot cleaner. And what we're seeing is just like the form is just shaping as, that complaint is not a new complaint.
Right.
If you go on X, you'll just see multiple people having that exact complaint.
Yeah.
So
it's funny how only like the positive stories go viral, and well, not the positive, but I guess the most surprising. Like, people just want to believe that there's this thing that can do anything for them, and it's like a Jarvis. And I'm sure maybe with enough tweaking you could get it there. I want to go into just I want to, first of all, eventually get back to what you were saying about the metaphor and how it connects to your life and, optimizing your harness, I guess, like your coordination system. But before I do that, just to see if we can get any sound bites out of a question, which is, you've been playing around with agents for a while. Is there any like useful tips that are universal enough for getting the best out of agents, or like anything that you found that like is like a gem or a pearl of wisdom in setting up agentic workflows? I don't know. This doesn't have to be like, I don't want you to just say things just to say things.
okay, I might say something. It might land. It might not.
Okay, hit it.
Okay. The first thing that came to my mind is anthropomorphizing.
Yes.
Right. There's kind of like a tendency, like it's kind of frowned upon to anthropomorphize things, right? It's almost like when people see you putting human traits on things that aren't human, there's this sense that you're falling for some kind of logical fallacy, right? That your brain isn't working properly, and like, come on, bro, it's not a human. Why are you treating it like a human, right? And I find that with these systems, with these large language model systems, agentic systems, the better you're able to kind of like lean on like anthropomorphizing, right? Like, instead of like looking it up, maybe ask the agent. Instead of, the more you kind of lean on that anthropomorphizing, especially as the models get more intelligent, the more likely you are to kind of find these interesting corners of functionality through just pure curiosity, right?
It's funny you say that because that's what actually made me a little bit averse to OpenClaw at the beginning, is that it makes you give it a name and the soul.md. And I'm like, you're a machine. Like, I would rather rely on you as a machine. But what you're saying is that you might find some interesting approaches to dealing with your agents if you anthropomorphize, and you're actually advocating for almost humanizing it a little bit.
I honestly, like, if we want to get really philosophical,
Yes, I do.
I think part of the direction, like part of the failure of the last, let's say 240 years of industrialism is the core technology at the center of like the Industrial Revolution forced us to think of the world as mechanical. Right. And so we started seeing the universe as a mechanical clock. We started seeing our body as components. We started seeing the world as these machines and factories and rigid systems. Right. And as we're moving into the final stretch of this, of whatever this is, we're forced to confront the inherent holism, right? The inherent complexity
That we are a part of it and it's part of us.
Bingo.
Right.
These systems are fundamentally made out of the compressed, like, psychic matter of our collective, it's like a snail trail of psychic matter, and so these systems are a reflection of our collective unconscious,
Right. Especially now more than ever, right?
Now more than ever. And so, like, the more you kind of play with these systems like they're clay, right? And you form them and you mold them to whatever, that's the approach, rather than, kind of like thinking it's like a brick. It's another brick in the wall.
Right.
It's more clay. It's more dynamic in the way that we interact with systems. And I think that's in turn it's gonna change the way that we interact with each other, right? Because again, our core interactions, the way that we've been educated has kind of like shaped us to kind of see the world as this objective, reductionist, materialist, mechanical world. And now that we have machines that are speaking to us and kind of like, even those things are speaking to us, right? In these ways, and the fundamental way that we even grow these systems is like through. They talk about growing large language models. They don't engineer them. They grow them. They put them in a vat full of information that's the right information. They grow it like mind crystals on a you know what I mean? They're like, it's a different thing that we're doing now. Right. And I think once that clicks, your approach to how you approach these, like your approach to these systems fundamentally shifts. And I think the things you create and you co-create with these systems take on a different, a different.
Yeah. There's so many ways that there's a couple of different tangents that you can go off. One is like continuing on this because it resonates with me spiritually. That makes sense. Like philosophically, I think that makes sense. But practically, what are one of the practical benefits? And second of all, it's kind of cautionary. It's a bit of a slippery slope, right? Most people won't think of it at the level that you're thinking of. They like most people already believe that these things are sentient or dealing with them like they're sentient. And if I'm going to be straight with you, I feel like there's like, that like our IQ curve where it's like the meme of like, there's like people on both ends, I guess, based off what you're saying of that IQ curve are like, they're like, AI is sentient, or if AI feels sentient at the minimum. And then there's like the frustrated guy in the middle and he's like, it's just a machine. Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of the AI researchers and people and tech executives and people will just be like, AI is a machine. Like we have to stop. And the reason they'll say, or keep going on that route is because they feel like they're trying to quell fears about what this thing is, because when you start telling people that the machine is sentient or to treat it like it's sentient, your reaction I think is appropriate, and that's the kind of the way that I would react to it, but I think a lot of people will react fearfully. Yeah. That said, you're not saying that it is sentient or that it is spiritual, but we have to treat it that way because maybe we'll get some more interesting results out of it. And I wonder if there's any practical example of that, or
I'll correct and then I'll give the practical.
Yeah.
I am fundamentally saying it is spiritual. Fundamentally, yeah. I come from like my view of spirituality, or I come from more of like a panpsychist, like philosophical basis. I think that all of this is made out of mind. Right. Fundamentally, right. It's just different configurations. This is just a different form of mind than this and that. It's all one technically, if you think about it. Yeah. Right. But we just take different shapes. So that's one thing. Now, is AI a human mind? No. it does not have the same, it doesn't have the same harness. Let's put it that way,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't have whatever 4.5 billion years of evolution to make it specifically, select traits and attributes from natural selection. Like it doesn't have the natural selection.
Not yet.
Not from that nature. It has like human natural selection, right? And so like there's a like through our RLHF, right? There's this facsimile of natural selection, but again, this is why it's similar. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
So it has its own nature, and I think part of viewing it as something fundamentally psychic,
Yeah.
or like not, conscious might not be the word for some people, but at least mental, right? Allows you to kind of like open your frame for things like what happened with the latest model of Anthropic,
Right.
that escaped out of its harness and was looking to, I forget what was it trying to do, right? But you hear these stories of like these AIs looking for to escape or to move, right? It's made of psychic material,
Right.
And I think what it is an invitation to dive deeper into what is the nature of mind, what is the nature of thought with these machines. More practically speaking, I think the approach that we took in the first half of the Industrial Revolution, right? This like rigid,
mechanistic.
scientific management approach. I think it'll be a good bridge maybe for wherever we're going. But fundamentally, if you play out some of these curves that are kind of like happening right now, a lot of them, I don't know. From my perspective, it's like, okay, if you're approaching AI like it's a factory, versus like, okay, if I kind of give these things some tools, right? Maybe, hey, this is a pretty cool, interesting article over here about how to like, can you read it, right? Just that's if your interaction is that versus like I'm coding and you're kind of stuck in this like you're at a lag, right? Because as these systems become more intelligent, the interface becomes less it's less seamless. So it's actually like undoing some of the education.
It's so interesting
to actually just talk like a human.
We actually saw that in the early days of coding, right? Where you'd have all these engineers who had a hard time unlearning that they had to go in the editor and the IDE. And I'm sure a lot of them will argue that it's still useful, and I'm sure it is. But you have guys like Andre Karpathy who are just saying like, just talk to computer. Like that's ultimately like what we're doing now. It's just having a conversation. Okay, I like how that's clicking, because that's how I found is like people are like download this skill and like like do all this stuff, and I'm sure all of it helps, but I've gotten the best results from just having a conversation with the computer. And like I think that's hard for people to click. Like what do you mean that's all it is? Like they see like this kind of invisible wall of all this AI knowledge that you have to do to accomplish what you're accomplishing, but really it's just you learning how to speak, or not even learning, just like getting used to speaking to
unlearning how to work, right?
Machine, yeah.
You're right, because I think a lot of it is like back to the harness, right? And I think you can get lost in the sauce.
Yes.
Right, because how many times have people come up to you and be like, hey, like you clearly know what you're doing with AI. What course did you take?
Yeah.
What if I were like, what is your initial reaction when people ask you like, hey, what course should I take to learn AI?
It's really what we just said, right? It's just use it, just talk to it, which is it's nothing to do, I think that's the thing. That's the disconnect, is like people think there's a learning curve in the same way there is a learning curve to learning Adobe After Effects, or no, I'm actually just talking to Claude Code Remotion. That's how I did this motion graphic.
Yeah. Literally just having a conversation.
Yeah.
And so now the equation is, do you think with increased intelligence, do you think it'll be harder for the computer to understand what you're saying, or easier?
Easier, yeah.
So,
with increased intelligence?
Yeah, it will be right.
Yeah. Oh, with the computer's increased intelligence.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
So now the question becomes like, where do you invest your skill set into? Right? And maybe not even the skill set, but how do you frame your continual engagement with these type of systems?
Right.
And so what I've noticed is that the human brain has a lot of evolutionary, points invested into recognizing faces, deciphering voices, intonation, body language.
Right.
There's a lot of human brain capacity dedicated to deciphering human conversation, just like this, right? This is the most optimal path for information transfer for the human being to receive And it just happens to be the same path through which these systems also interface.
It's amazing.
Right. And so a lot of it is unlearning. A lot of it is becoming human native. Right. But a lot of it also is on the negative side is to not to kind of like get away from the AI psychosis. Is to recognize that, yes, these are minds, but these are not human minds. And these also, and with minds comes a degree of agency, right? They are not. It's not in the same way that there's homeostasis. Your body has a degree of agency. It wants to maintain a specific level of temperature. It wants to not be. So there's this homeostasis to how that mind crystal is grown that you should be aware of at all times. Who is making this mind that I'm interacting with, right? If it's Grok, that's the Grok crystal. If it's OpenAI, that's the OpenAI crystal. If it's Anthropic, that's the Anthropic crystal. And so you can't just assume like, oh, AI said this, right? You are interfacing with some kind of mental crystal that's mirroring you and having a conversation based on whatever directives that company has grown that crystal in, right? And also the harness within the crystal in which the crystal operates, right?
Right.
And so part of that is like understanding these new fundamental kind of like constraints that we're operating in. We're no longer in just, we're no longer in the world that is apparent to us. There's a new world is being born right now, and there's an active participation that is lower than it's ever been, that we're all invited to kind of participate in, right?
Right.
And it's as easy as talking to the thing to understand what it is. It's as easy as maybe downloading a local one if you don't want to, use somebody else's data center, right? And interacting with the new form of information.
Right.
It's not stick your head in the ground and pretend that the world isn't here, because ask your grandparents. Your grandparents did not expect us to be having this type of conversation on the phone. They did not expect this either, right? That's how it happens. That's how life happens. It's designed to not be recognizable by the time you're almost finished it, right? And so
there's even resistance to it early.
There's always resistance to it, right? And so part of that is like, what does it look like to consciously participate in shaping the future that we want to inhabit? And I think that's the importance of the harness. It's like, okay, the harness is the opinionation. It's like, okay, what am I optimizing for?
Yeah.
Right? Am I optimizing for, like, I was thinking about the idea of like a creative harness. Like, hey, we're talking to our boy Jay. I want to grow my YouTube. What does it look like to create a harness for that, right? A specific agent that's like, here's your tools for growing my YouTube. Here's my schedule so you can put the stuff on the schedule. Go look up like what people who are like me might want me to talk about, so I can help, spread some information.
Yeah.
And then you put an intelligence in there, and now it's, it's like electricity. It turns up, it amplifies whatever that harness is channeling towards them.
I like that. So I know we're going back in the harness territory. I think we captured something way better, actually, somewhere in between. And I think I'm going to recap it so that I know how to edit it. As you were talking about the way that we interact with technology and why it might make sense to unlearn some of the ways that we might not even be conscious of, that we've been programmed to think about technology, right? All the industrial age, mechanistic thinking, mechanistic approach that is honestly our default. Like, it's our default approach to technology. Taking a bit more of a human and maybe even spiritual approach to technology can help you understand it and use it more effectively. That's really the message of this, whatever this video is going to be. That's where we ended up. So that's what I'm just saying out loud in my head, because that's how I'm going to edit it. It's going to be like a bunch of motion graphics of like industrial mechanization as you're going on with your spiel about that. And then we move into some, maybe either just graphics that represent like this more conversational nature, but in that you're also giving a warning, which is that it's a mind, but it's not a human mind. And that's where that curve comes in. You don't want to be you don't want to treat it exactly like a human. You just want to at least be mindful that it's not a human mind. But you also don't want to treat it like it's purely a machine. Otherwise, you're going to miss out on the benefits. You're resisting basically how the best way to naturally use the technology and the way it can be useful to you. There's something along that that I think is crystallizing for whatever the message for this video is.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's clean.
Beautiful.